All right, you bunch of yahoos, strap yourselves in for another episode of Dan and Don's Toxic Masculinity.
In other words, shut up, sit up, and pay attention.
In the book here, we met a young lieutenant colonel in Russia that we were at the KGB Officers Club in Moscow, and it's built on tiers. You know, the generals are up here, and you go all the way down. At the bottom end is the militia, which are the cops in Russia. They don't have a gendarmerie or police force. The militia fills that role. And we met a young lieutenant colonel who spoke like 6 languages and that. Everybody, we were with a major general from the KGB who would invite us. We were his guests. And everybody treated this guy with a lot of deference in that. Had we known who he was going to be, we'd have got to know him a lot better.
Yeah.
Very, very personable man.
Really?
His name was Vladimir Putin, if you haven't already figured that out.
Yeah, I was going to say it's okay.
Yeah, Lieutenant Colonel Putin. But even General Morozov, I mean, he was a general to a lieutenant colonel, but he treated him
With respect.
We were
respect.
also there with the internal, the deputy, what was it called? Guy from he was Kazakhstan. He's now the interior.
Bulat Yanasayev.
Yeah.
I actually brought him over to the States and threw a huge dinner party at a restaurant in Georgetown in Washington, D.C.
1767.
It was a number. 1718 or something. I don't even remember the number. Yeah. But it was a really upscale restaurant. We had our own private room. I had my own special menus printed and everything. I had the people from Chevron and Exxon and Shell there. And we put on this dinner and basically created the independent petroleum industry in Kazakhstan right after they broke away from the Soviet Union.
Really?
Yeah. And
when
unlike
we
Hunter
went
Biden,
to
I
the
never saw a
Soviet Union-
frickin' penny.
The only people going to the Soviet Union at that time were con men and lawyers.
Right.
We weren't in that group. We had gone over there. We were working for a aluminum mining concern out of London that had verticalized their market. They made a deal with the mines. They made a deal with the refineries. Hello. They made a deal with the all the way out to the ports. It was so screwed up. Like if you want to mine aluminum, you mine the bauxite, you ship it by rail car, to a refinery, who then turns it into aluminum. But you have to make a deal with not only the railroad to take it to the refinery, you have to make a deal with the people who own the boxcars that haul it. And then the marshaling yard, both at the beginning and at the end. And it was this really complicated method. That's how we eventually got to meet Morozov, and that was they were the fixers. When the Soviet Union collapsed, the KGB no longer had a function because they belonged to the Communist Party. The Communist Party's out of control. They no longer have the control, so they don't have a job yet. They own industries, they own cities, they own all the concessions for the mining, they own their own secret ports, they have their own spetsnaz, their own navy, their own military, all that belongs to the KGB. So they were looking for a way to make this all happen. Now they call them the Slivovaki, which is the KGB functionaries that eventually became an oligarchy within Russia's political system. So we're there. We're in the early days. We're a couple of senior NCOs that have found a nice little niche with a couple of mining companies that want to do a program over there. So we're over there. It's kind of like the Wild Wild West at that time. And we get to meet all these people. So Nazarbayev, who's like the number 2 man under, what's his name, the guy that's in charge of Kazakhstan.
Bulat.
Not Bulat was the interior minister. He's still the interior minister, but anyway, his best buddy is a guy named Rustam Karbayez. And Rustam, they'd both been KGB officers. When Rustam was in charge of all the spetsnaz, the special forces in Afghanistan, Bulat had been his commanding officer. He was a lieutenant general, and Rustam was a brigadier general. And Rustam had, the Soviets operated different than us. You know, like we'd go in, like in special projects, we'd set up patrol area and we'd go in, do all this stuff, set up raids, ambushes, and operations. They operated off the hilltops. They would go in and seize a mountaintop, and they'd use that as a patrol base, and they'd spread out from there. So they got this incident where they have a spetsnaz company that's besieged on top of a mountain by the Mujahideen, and they're getting hammered. And Rustam comes in as a command and control helicopter and is trying to supervise the battle, and he lands on top of the mountaintop, and he's got the political officer, the commissar for the region with him, and the chopper gets shot down on short final. So the chopper's on the ground, they're on the ground. So he's calling in airstrikes all night. Next morning, they're getting ready to pull out, and they're taking all the wounded out first. And we're in a nightclub with these 2 guys in Alma-Ata, where all the TV stars and all that hang out and that, and we're drinking some vodka, getting pretty hammered and that.
And fermented mare's milk. Which is very
milk.
salty, interesting.
and very refreshing at the time. And the commissar, the next morning, they're taking all the wounded out. Now, he's on the ground with a brigadier general who's in charge of the spetsnaz. It's a spetsnaz team there. And the commissar, the political commissar, gets on the helicopter when it comes in to pick up the wounded, and he goes, I have to go out with the wounded. And he goes, no, the wounded are going out. There's only so much weight, and you're excess weight. And the guy goes, no, if I have to go out because if they capture me, the entire Soviet regime will fall. And he goes, you're a political officer. Just like what are they going to learn? Where Lenin's tomb is? Right. And the guy won't get off the helicopter. He goes, only the wounded are going. And the guy goes, I'm not getting off. So he pulls out his Markov and shoots him in the kneecap. Goes, now you're wounded. Now you can leave.
Wow.
So they're on. The 4 of us are laughing about it, right? And then we start going, and he goes, he pulls his shirt off. And he goes, I got shot here by fragments from a Stinger missile that was shot at my helicopter, and I got wounded here. And I pulled my pants down. And I go, I got shot here by an AK that was made in Russia, wielded by a North Vietnamese in 1968. And we're doing. We look over, and the other end of the bar are all these TV personalities from the Kazakh TV programs. Are going like that, looking at it. It was a good time. Yeah. But there was a different attitude then. It was a different atmosphere.
Yeah.
And of course, American cop that was there doing the TV program about cops in Moscow.
We spent a night in a KGB steam bath in
St.
Petersburg. And by the end of the night, all the KGB agents were up against one wall like this. We scared the crap out of them.
Well, they're going, we're taking pictures. Good. Get a shot of that.
That fighter from in the UFC who retired, where was he from? The tough guy.
Khabib?
Khabib, yeah.
I couldn't tell you right offhand what part of Russia. I just know that he's.
Remember Steve Segal and his bodyguard?
He's a very good friend of Steve Seagal's, by the way.
No fucking way.
Oh yeah, I've known him for years.
Oh, jeez.
And A, he was not a SEAL.
B, he was not in the CIA.
A, he was not in the CIA.
He's insane.
Well, yeah, he's a good guy though. You know,
You
whatever
would never
you hear,
guess that.
I know a different guy. I know a guy who's a very accomplished jazz musician who used to go down to the hospices with veterans and actually write letters for them and that.
Really?
And was very involved in
That's the
Finding-
Steven Seagal
find-
you do.
that I know.
Okay.
That was very involved with disclosing the sex trade of using minors in Southeast Asia.
Really?
Yeah.
He doesn't-
Different guy than what you hear and see on
that
TV.
guy I respect, the one you're talking about.
That's the one I respect too. Yeah. But he had a bodyguard that I met that was on the most wanted list for the Balkans, for the Balkan wars and that. Going, hey, I know that guy from somewhere. Different guy.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of people don't like him because they consider him bullshit. As not being a martial artist, as not being this, not being that. The guy I know had a good heart. What more can you say?
No, you're right. No, that's I didn't know anything about that.
Remember the
Well, no.
trial
Different sides
of
of the
Billy?
coin.
The trial of Billy Jack,
Prost.
the guy that did all the martial arts stunts, and that was a guy named Bong Soo Han.
Yeah.
I once helped Bong Soo Han. He and I threw a drunk out of a bar up on Santa Monica Boulevard together. I had this friend, Dr. Paul Chung. He was the head of the U.S. Korean Navy Cooperation League. And he used to come over, and he'd always stay in Little Korea. I went out with him one day, and when he was staying in Little Korea, we're going to go down to this bar and meet a really close friend of mine. And his really close friend was Bong Soo Han,
No. Are you
the
kidding?
founder of Hwarang Do, and the guy that did all the stunts for Tom Laughlin in the Billy Jack movies. And he was a really, really nice guy, but we're in this bar up on Santa Monica Boulevard, and some drunk starts fucking running around the bar, picking fights and screaming and shouting obscenities and acting like a complete asshole. And I said, well, what do you think we ought to do? And he said, well, we need to get this guy out of here. And I said, I'm on. And the two of us went and grabbed this son of a bitch and threw him out on the Santa Monica Boulevard. It was fun. But that's my
That's one of 80.
that's my movie star martial arts story.
Now, Don's the movie star here amongst us.
Yeah. Oh, come on, Dan.
I grew up in Newport Beach, California, and I lived at the Balboa Bay Club.
Oh, yeah.
And
Tell them how you met John Wayne.
This is a great.
Oh, yeah.
John Wayne was a
Wait, you're
very
holding
good.
out on me?
There's a classic.
yeah.
You're holding out on me?
John Wayne was a very good friend of mine.
Yeah.
Very good friend. And here's how.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. You'll love this.
We lived in a little guarded community in Newport Beach called Bay Shores when I was in my late teens. And my brother and I, my brother's a little younger than me, and we were very good friends with two little boys.
His name is Spanky.
Yeah, we called him, well, his name was Jim, but we called him Spanky because he looked exactly like Spanky McFarlane.
He does.
But
We took him to Mexico.
now, hey, let me tell my story first. All right? Anyway, so the Gates, their father, who was a big game hunter, and their whole house was full of stuffed heads and elephant tusks and crap like that.
Trophies all over the walls.
Oh,
yes.
he decided to move to Palm Springs, so they moved out. And the rumors started in the neighborhood that a big movie star was buying their house. Well, the big movie star turned out to be John Wayne. And it wasn't directly across the street from us, but it was like at a 30-degree angle. Okay, it was very close to being across the street. Well, at the time, I had a 1930 Model A Ford that I'd built from parts. Yeah. And it was bright canary yellow with black fenders. It was like totally cool with a rumble seat. So one day I'm coming down Bayshore Drive, which had speed bumps. And I'm speeding because I'm 17.
That's right.
And when you're 17, you speed.
That's what you do.
So I'm going about twice the posted speed limit, and I hit the speed bump there right by the little beach, and my left front wheel breaks loose. The car falls down onto the speed bump on its axle, and the tire rolls.
It's done this.
The tire rolls down the street, up the driveway, into the garage of the Gates house, okay? And hits the side of a station wagon that's parked in there and then goes and falls flat. So I'm like, oh, my God. I'm a 17-year-old kid, right? I'm like, oh, my God, what am I going to do? So I go up. I didn't want to go in the garage uninvited and get my wheel back. So I go up and knock on the front door. And who answers the front door? John Wayne. Yeah. Because that's who's bought the house. And I'm like, sir,
get my tire back.
I'd like to know if I could have your permission to go in your garage and get my wheel. He's like, what's that? I said, the wheel of my car is in your garage, and I'd like to know if I could have your permission to go get it. So he walks out with me, and we walk around, and there's my wheel. Unfortunately, it hadn't done any damage to the side of his car because he had a special built Mercury station wagon with a 2-inch raise in the roof to make it easy for him to drive.
Right.
So I run back over to my house, which is almost right across the street, and get my brother and my toolbox, and we come back to put the wheel back on. And the whole time he stands out there with us. He goes, "What? Who are you boys? What do you do? A lot of questions." So we get the wheel, we jack it up and get the wheel reattached and drive it back around into the alley, into the garage so that I can finish fixing it, And after that, he knows us. So we see, and he's on the board of governors of the Balboa Bay Club, as is my father. So they have these black tie board of governors meetings about every 3 months, right? And we always see him. And I remember one time, we're in the men's room at the Shell Bar, and there's a board of governors meeting comes on. John Wayne walks into the men's room, and he's got his tuxedo. He's messing around with his tie, and he's like, let me tell you something, boys. Never do anything in life where you have to wear one of these goddamn monkey suits. So I just got to know him because he was a neighbor, So then I went in the Army. And I went in Special Forces. Well, while I was going through Special Forces training group, he was making the movie, The Green Berets. In fact, I had just gotten to the 6th Special Forces group out of training group when we were marched down to the theater in Fayetteville, North Carolina to all attend the premiere of the movie because it premiered in Fayetteville. Right. So I got leave. And when I graduated from Special Forces Training Group, I got leave and I went home to Newport, and I thought I'll go over and see John Wayne. And I went over to his house and I knocked on the door, and a woman, Hispanic woman maid, answered the door.
Chica.
And I said, I'm looking for I'm looking for Mr. Wayne. And she said, well, he's out on his boat. Well, I knew where the Wild Goose was birthed. It was over around by the cannery, just not too far from the American Legion. So I drove around over there, and I went in the parking lot, and the slip was empty. And I remember it was low tide because the thing down to the slip was super steep. I walked down there, and I paced around a little bit, and I'm like, well, crap, I missed him. Yeah. And I'm, leaving, going back to Fort Bragg. And I walked up the really steep gangway back up to the parking lot. And just as I got to the top, I looked down and I see the nose of his boat coming around down by the American Legion up the channel, right? So I waited. And I was in my greens. I had my dress greens on. I had my green beret. I had my spit shine jump boots, And I waited until they came in. And so as they started to come into the slip, I walked back down the gangplank onto the dock, and I stood there. And before the Wild Goose was even fully in the slip, he jumped off, and he comes out, and he looks down at me, and goes, well, you made it, did you? And I said, yes, sir, I did. And he said, well, I have to hear everything about this. Come on board. So I went on the Wild Goose, and he had the captain take it back out, and we cruised around the bay for about an hour and a half while I told him all about training group and everything I'd done and what I'd learned and blah, 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 and where I thought I might be going from here, yada, yada, yada. And by the next time I got back to Newport Beach, he was gone.
All right.
So that was the last time I ever saw him.
Thank you for watching another episode of Dan and Don's Toxic Masculinity. You better like, subscribe, and share, or I'm going to come to your house.